The Big 12 is all different. How is Colorado and all the new schools going to fare? Are the old schools going to run it? We're going to talk about that on today's episode of Locked On Buffs and Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? This is Locked On Buffs and a Locked On Big 12 crossover. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Joining me, the host of Locked On Big 12, Drake Toll. Drake breaks down everything you need to know about the Big 12, and he's also the voice of the party animals over in the banana world in baseball. So, Drake, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk some Big 12 football with us.
Yeah, Kevin, the Big 12 preseason poll just dropped, and we now have our 16 teams ranked. I'm excited to tear this thing absolutely apart.
Let's absolutely do it. So for those of you at home who don't know how the rankings went out, I will give you a quick spiel about it, or not spiel. I'll just give you a quick rundown. It's Utah 1, Kansas State 2, last year's runner-up Oklahoma State at 3, Kansas at 4, Arizona 5, Iowa State at 6, West Virginia 7, UCF at 8, Texas Tech at 9, TCU 10, Colorado 11, Baylor at 12, BYU 13, Cincinnati 14, Houston at 15, and then Arizona State rounding out the bottom. 16 teams now, so it's no longer the Big 12. It is the Big 16, if you will. Let's talk about specifically Colorado at first. Stands out. I think there's a lot of buzz around them. There's a lot of hoopla, a lot of excitement because they improved the roster. I won't lie to you, Drake. This roster would beat last year's roster probably by 35 if they were able to play against each other. But the powers that be, aka the Big 12 media, they have ranked them as the number 11th team in the conference. So what comes to mind when you see that?
Last year's lack of consistency from Colorado is what keeps them out of the top 10 of the Big 12 this year. Do they have the best roster on paper in the entire conference? The answer to that is yes. I've had a lot of people who have come to me after seeing my show and gone, this guy's a Colorado hater. I'm not. I think the way that Deion Sanders is revolutionizing a lot of parts of college football is very good for the game. Do I think it's going to stick? Do I think it works long-term? Do I think that he has the best interest of Colorado at heart right now, especially long-term? I don't think so. The guy's a dad, right? He is his son's best interest. The guy's an entrepreneur. The guy is a businessman. That is what he's looking at as he walks into 2024 with Colorado. And I think that's the reason they're at 11, despite having the best roster, if you ask 24/7. That's the reason the number 16 in the country on EA Sports is because EA looks at a 3-star player at Colorado and a 3-star player at Kansas State. And you say, yeah, Kansas State's going to be better, but we got to rank these guys the exact same. And then you see, well, Colorado's got 4- and 5-star guys, way more than Kansas State. How do you justify, from a video game standpoint, putting Colorado behind Kansas State? You can't. That's why they're 16th in the country, and that's why they are so dangerous in the Big 12 this year, because they have the horses in the stable. Are they as deep as Utah? Are they as deep as Oklahoma State? I don't think so. But that starting 22 or 21, if you have Travis Hunter, that starting 21 is going to be so lethal. And yeah, Colorado's a couple key injuries away from going 5-7. I do believe that. However, this is still a squad with potential to go 7-5 and 8-4. And when you were 4-8 last year and have a tough schedule this year, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and I think the biggest reason, and this is I'm not calling people out, I'm not naming names, but I think there's one word to describe what Big 12 media voters felt when it came to voting for this, for voting about Colorado, and that word is scared. Because realistically, no one wants to be that one guy where it's like, Colorado's at 3 for me, or Colorado's at 2 for me. Because then it's like, okay, this guy's drinking the Deion Kool-Aid. This guy's not taking it seriously. But if, like Drake said, on paper, this roster is as good as it gets in the Big 12. Obviously, other teams have better suited defenses. They have more experience together. But I think there's 2 things hurting Colorado. One, the perception around them. Obviously, I think there's a little bit of fear. And I think, Drake, you could agree or disagree with me. But do you think when people put their name next to Colorado in a bolder prediction, like say 10-2 on the year, they know they're going to get pushback, right? More than the normal like Kansas 10-2 prediction.
Yeah. I mean, you lose your journalistic credibility in moments like that. I mean, you put out, hey, I think Colorado's, oh my gosh, there's a dog behind me. You put out that Colorado is going to go 10-2, and people are like, oh, well, that guy's stupid. What an idiot. And that you can't, nobody wants to be the idiot that,
right.
And then if Colorado does go 10-2, you're like, oh, well, I had that. But it's not a risk that Danny Cannell is going to take or that Joel Klatt is going to take. Those guys aren't going to pick Colorado very high up. And that's just the way that sports media goes. I don't think I can blame these guys. I'm not picking them 10-2, though. If they do go 10-2, I could see why it happened. I could see what, because again, the roster's so deadly. You have the best quarterback in the conference and the best overall player in the conference. Those are two things that bode well for you.
Yeah, and I think the second thing before you got scared by your dog.
I mean, I was shocked. I was like, I was poked by something behind me, and I mean, the dog. The door must be open. It's shocking.
It's okay. It's okay. But I think the second thing that people are kind of holding back when it comes to Colorado is the unknown. It's like, okay, he ran this transfer portal thing back after it. We'll say it didn't work in year one. Like they improved the roster, but it didn't work to the sense of they were contending for anything.
Right.
So now people are like, okay, I kind of bought into the buzz a little bit. They were 3-0. It was exciting. It was a great September. Let me tell you, it was very exciting. It was very fun. But now people are like, I don't know if this works. I'm kind of out on the portal method. So I think that's the second reason why people are kind of hesitant. What outside of Colorado, what is a team that kind of surprised you where they ranked, whether it was high, low, medium?
Yeah, I thought that the Big 12 media overall, and by the way, Kevin, I voted for these for 3 years and then decided 2 years ago, I was like, I'm done. I don't even like I none of these are ever very meaningful. The preseason rankings, I don't vote. I don't spend my time on it anymore. I don't really feel like I care that much. Felt like UCF at 8, Texas Tech at 9, TCU at 10. Those are 3 schools that I have a lot of question marks around, to where they could very easily end up in the 13 spot or end up in the 4 spot, and I wouldn't be shocked. One team that I did think was undervalued here is Kansas. I think Kansas is better than Kansas State. I think Kansas is going to end up winning the conference in year 5 under Lance Leipold because of what he's built. They have an unbelievable quarterback, running back, secondary. Those are some key things in a Big 12 that has so many great quarterbacks. You're going to have a hell of a secondary. Kansas does. I think they're a little bit too low. Arizona at 5, Utah at 1. The fact that 2 of the top 5 are the newcomers from the Pac-12 is not shocking because they both have very solid rosters. And of course, Utah is going to be picked number 1 overall in the conference with Cam Rising coming back. He's kind of the face of what the Big 12 offers when you think about the Utah Utes. I think the top 10 feels pretty right. And then Colorado, I don't know if I could justify putting Colorado above TCU based on the offseason or above Texas Tech. However, if they finish above either of those schools, not shocking based on how those 2 schools fared last season. And Colorado is better than Cincinnati and Houston and Baylor. That is not a hot take and something that I will fight for all day long. This is not a bad list. I do think it's terrible that Kansas got left out at 4, though.
Yeah, I think you could argue with a lot of the top 7 teams. West Virginia honestly surprised me, and I thought they'd be higher. You know, it was like
I would probably put them above Iowa State.
Yeah, it's like, okay, they shocked everyone with a 9-win season. Everyone's like, don't sleep on West Virginia. And then the poll comes out and they're like, nah, we're kind of sleeping on West Virginia again. They're like almost middle of the pack. And so I was like, that was interesting. I also look at like the bottom. Like you have, it's really interesting. Most of the new programs outside of UCF, or the OG new guys. So BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, they're still at the bottom. Like they're still working their way up. And I think this next season will be really interesting for a lot of teams in new conferences because obviously it's all over the country. But the teams that didn't make the jump from the Power 5 or are just going from Power 5 to Power 5, how do they fare compared to the teams that are going from Group of 5 to Power 5? Like, does Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, do they still have like 3 years before they're a year for beat away from contending for anything? And then also, I wanted to swing back to Colorado real quick just because I thought of this on the fly. End of the season rankings come around, Big 12 standings, I guess, not rankings. What is their ceiling? Like, where do you possibly see Colorado being at its highest and then at their lowest as well?
I think for Colorado, let me ask you this. What is the confidence around the program as it sits? And this is going to be like a 1-sentence answer before I give you because that plays into this so much.
I think the program itself is as confident as ever. Like they think they're going to be contending for a Big 12 title.
If that's the case, then Colorado has, like North Dakota State, Nebraska, Colorado State, you start out 3-0. You start out 4-0, they're going to be Baylor. Then you beat UCF. Now you're 5-0. This is 5-0 is the best case scenario for anybody. Going undefeated is it's like that it's the ceiling. And then past that, I think Kansas State's tough, but it's a home game, right? Cincinnati and Arizona are both winnable games. I think Arizona for Colorado is not going to be as tough of a matchup because they're used to each other. You go on the road against Texas Tech. Tech could be a 6-6 team this year. There's a world in which Colorado, who has a very tough last 3 games, goes 8-4, ceiling of 9-3 if you trip up one of those better teams. I think 9-3 ceiling is really solid. Floor for Colorado, you could lose to North Dakota State. That's not shocking. They're good at football. I'm not
get a lot of
dogging
people.
Colorado. Yeah, they're good at football. You could very well lose to Nebraska. You will beat Baylor, I think. I think the floor here is another 4-8 season. And that's because North Dakota State's tough and Nebraska's tough. But I do have a lot of confidence in Colorado beating Colorado State, Baylor, and Cincinnati, and I think they'll trip somebody else up in here.
Okay, who's the biggest? This is going to sound aggressive. Who's the biggest fraud in the Big 12 right now? Like, who are you looking at this ranking? Yeah, there's always one. There's always one. You have Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State at the top, and I have mine. I'll go first if you'd like me to, since I'm the one.
I think it's Arizona.
Okay, I was going to go with Oklahoma State.
Okay.
I think the Big 12 this year is better suited to have more teams kind of vying for those top 2 spots than it did last year. Yeah. I think West Virginia could sneak into the Big 12 title game. Realistically, I don't know the math on it, but there's probably like 30 different combinations of conference championship matchups for the Big 12 right now. And I think Oklahoma State, I don't think they were that good last year. I think they were just good enough at certain times, which, I mean, that's the name of the game.
Did get their crap rocked by South Alabama. I'll give you that. The reason that I can come around with you, they have the best running back in the conference, maybe the best, maybe my favorite offensive weapon with Ollie Gordon. He's good.
Right.
And the problem is Alan Bowman's just not that good. Like he's just not
45.
Yeah, he's not going to push you to new heights. He's not. And we know that. And Shedeur Sanders is. So, I mean, quarterback advantage, Colorado. So I think that Alan Bowman will hold those dudes back for sure.
Yeah, and then one team that you think, before we move on, that needs some more love. I think when we think of rankings in the preseason, there's always one team where it's like, that's not right. They deserve more.
Again, I think Kansas at 4 is not completely, silly. I would move West Virginia up into the top 5, probably. I probably have them at 5. Give me Texas Tech, though. That surprises a lot of people. They finished in the top 4 this season from that 9 spot. They have a 5-spot jump, which is good. That's good.
Yeah, and I think Texas Tech last year, everyone was like dark horse playoff contender, and then they kind of fizzled. So this is when they hit those strides, I would imagine. So
100%.
Really interesting Big 12 slate ahead of us. And I think, do you have anything else to add before we move on?
No, let's rock.
Let's rock. Okay, the Big 12. It's going to be very exciting. It's very different now. We got new teams, new places. People left. People joined. We're going to talk about that when we come back. But first, a word from our sponsors over at Gametime. Drake, I know when you go shopping for tickets, you're always looking at Gametime because they have the best deals. They're an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. You could save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, comedy, theater, whatever it may be. Just got my dad a birthday gift. We're going to see a comedian. Use Gametime. Got a really great deal, really great seats. So go check out Gametime. They have flash deals. You could save even more with an exclusive in-app deal on select seats ahead of the game or the event. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets or whatever tickets you're using with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Buffs, the Locked On Big 12 crossover. It's Kevin Borba, it's Drake Toll, and we're talking all things Colorado, all things Big 12. And right now we're talking about the Big 12 expansion. The expansion pack, Drake, it expanded. It's bigger, it's better. Maybe, who knows? Give me the quick breakdown of like your overall perspective on the Big 12 right now, where Colorado fits in it. And is this better for them, worse for them? What does their future look like in the Big 12?
Look at this. I think there's a point that I make that I will just die by. And I make it a lot, but people need to hear it. If you heard me say this 7 times, it's the first time you've heard it. I want you to take this to work. I want the water cooler conversation of, well, the Big 12 is irrelevant now because Texas and Oklahoma are gone and they have a lot less money. What I need you to know is that you, the listener, me, the host, Kevin, we paid for our house, or we paid rent, or we paid a car payment, or we paid for insurance in the last month. And that was $250 or $2,500. And not a dime of that money came from the Big 12 or your college football team or the money to help facilitate your team. We always talk about how, Texas and Oklahoma are going to make a whole lot more money, so I'm happy they're leaving. Or, oh, man, I can't wait for Kansas State or Colorado. We're going to get more money now. You're not. This has a direct effect on your viewership experience. And right now, I would rather be watching a 10-2 Utah a 10-2 Kansas State than I would watch a 7-5 Oklahoma go lose on the road in Starkville, Mississippi, and go, oh, that's not as fun. But we have more money. You don't. So if you're talking viewership experience, the Big 12 gives you weekend and weekend. Look, there are people who go, yeah, I don't really care to see Cincinnati play BYU. I get it, dude. Fine. Those are two teams that you saw as group of 5 teams squaring off just 3 years ago. And now it's a Big 12 matchup. If you nationally don't want to watch it, I don't care. I'm a sicko who's going to watch it. However, when Utah plays Kansas State or Oklahoma State plays Colorado or any of the, there's certain matches we have in the years to come that I go, I like that. Like that's appealing to me. So for the Big 12, you're in a great spot right now because it's entertaining. Let's stop with the whole like, oh, my school has more money now. Ha 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 ha. You don't see a dime of that. You just get a worse viewership experience.
Yeah, I think the one thing that fans need to realize, specifically Colorado, Arizona, Utah, Arizona State, you have stability. You have, at least for now, you have a place to call home. Whereas the Pac-12, it was a sinking ship that was on fire that had a case of the bubonic plague as well. Like there was everything that could go wrong in the Pac-12. There was a point where Texas and Oklahoma wanted to join the Pac-12.
True.
And they did not. If spoiler alert, just in case anyone hasn't caught up on the more recent seasons of college football, they didn't join the Pac-12. So Pac-12 gone, Big 12 really prime position for Colorado, no pun intended, to sort of establish himself as a respected, I don't want to say power, but respected program. Same goes for Utah. The same goes for Kansas State. Texas and Oklahoma were the longtime faces, and they were of the Big 12. And now, who's the face, Drake? We ask 100 people. We ask all those people that voted for Big 12 media, whatever. We're going to get 100 different answers because Colorado's flashy. Utah's the most consistent. Kansas State is realistically the best Big 12 team that was in the Big 12 already. Yeah, and then there's new schools. So the Big 12 offers new opportunity, and I think that's exciting. What do you think about this new opportunity, new excitement, new face of the Big 12? Who is it? Is there one? Do you care?
It's tough. Borba, there is, if I may, there is a lot to say. I just made the money spiel. When you look at a school like Kansas, who in their EADA rankings per Jeff Fuller are like a top 20, top 25 school in the country when it comes to athletic revenue in the last 20 years, that's really impressive. That is where you start talking about the face of a conference. That's when the money conversation comes in because TV networks are vying to pull more viewers and more money. And if your school gives them that, you get to become the face of a conference. You get to have more big noon kickoffs. You get to have more college game day opportunities. And Kansas could be that. Literally Kansas. And part of that story starts with them sucking so hard for so long. They sucked. Nobody wanted to be Kansas. And now, rags to riches, 5 years later under Lance Leipold, they beat Oklahoma last year, and they're good now. They could win the Big 12 championship. And if they do, not only will they be a basketball powerhouse, one of the top 3, like a Mount Rushmore basketball program, they'll have a football program that people are talking about. Deion Sanders is the biggest personality star of the Big 12, certainly. But then you have like that weird tier 2 of Uncle Kyle Whittingham and crazy Uncle Mike Gundy, who they just say things. And then Neil Brown, like, should have gotten fired and didn't, and wins 9 games, gets Mayo poured on him, and it's just that goofy guy. And there are so many of those little pieces of the conference that make it endearing. Who's the face of the conference? Could be Kansas. If it's one person, it's Deion Sanders. That's objective.
Yeah, and I think Deion Sanders is the face. If you're Colorado,
that's not bad.
You want to be the face because that's your biggest selling point against the SEC and the Big Ten. Because obviously right now, college football is trying to be monopolized by the SEC and Big Ten programs. And if you're Colorado, it's like, okay, yeah, go play for a mid-tier SEC program, win 7-8 games, never make the playoff, or come to the premier program. This is obviously the sales pitch. This isn't me saying this is what it is right now. Come to the premier program, contend for the playoff every year, and get coached by Deion Sanders. That's a tough pitch to turn down, Drake. I don't know if Deion Sanders was looking me eye to eye and saying all this, if I could be like, I'm good. I don't know if anyone could say that. So that's the really interesting aspect about Colorado's new fit in the Big 12. I'll go on a quick Pac-12 tangent before we move on to just expansion in general. Colorado in the Pac-12 was like, I don't know. They were that new kid that transferred in, never really made friends, didn't really find their clique. It was like, They tried cross country and they didn't like running. They tried baseball, but the baseball dudes had already been playing together for 12 years. They tried football and there's 70 guys on the roster and they just weren't one of the main guys, and it didn't work out. They just were not in a clique. They never found a rival. They never got their feet on the ground. Now they return to the Big 12. Big 12 is full of new faces. It is building itself on being new, a new edition of whatever conference football, a new edition of college football fandom, brands, pageantry. And so Colorado kind of has a new place to fit in. And I think that is the perfect description of the Big 12 is all these schools want to fit in and they all want to be valued. And I think this is the one conference across college football where everyone, for the most part, is on a similar plane in terms of being valued. And so I think that's kind of the great part about the Big 12.
I love that this conference is very even, and parity doesn't necessarily sell at the very top. Again, talking about TV networks, but it's fun for me, man. I love, like, 1 week you might beat West Virginia by 45, and then West Virginia might go play the number one team in the Big 12, Utah, and beat them by 30. And you go, well, that's the Big 12. I legitimately think we're going to see that this year. Now that means a lot of 9-3s, a lot of 8-4s, and you're limiting your college football playoff access, but who cares? I like watching good teams.
I want to see a world where 14 teams are bowl eligible. I want to see
a world.
Do it. Yeah, just do it. Everybody go 6-6 for the memes, for the memory.
Yeah.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the future of the Big 12. Is there more expansion on the horizon? Do they need to expand? We're going to talk about that because Drake is a sicko for some expansion. Welcome back to the Locked On Buffs, Locked On Big 12 crossover. We talked about what the Big 12 is now, but let's talk about its future, Drake. They obviously are having to play keep up with the Big 12, or not the Big 12, the SEC, the Big 10, and everyone's looking at the ACC kind of waiting for it to collapse. It feels like it's a house of cards that's glued together, but I see a little wiggle. I see the bottom left corner, it's moving a little bit. So talk to me about what you think the future of the Big 12 looks like.
The Big 12 is going to change its name. And with all due respect to everyone who exists, I don't give a rat's ass about the Big 12 changing its name, to use the verbiage that Mike Gundy used. Because guess what? Twitter, we call it Twitter, right? It changed its name to X. No one's going to call it the All-State 12, the All-State 16, the Meineke Car Care 12. Nobody cares. You will still call it the Big 12. And the logo is going to change on the field. And the logo is going to change on the jersey. And it's going to have a bunch of All-State stuff. And there's going to be private equity. And All-State's going to have a say in what the Big 12 does. But they're a massive corporation. And that might not be the worst thing in the world. And then if that puts $10 million, $8 million per team in your pocket every year, you're not going to complain. Me and you, us, the general fans, dude, talk about like the power of a name. Sure, I guess. Like Meta World Peace has changed his 7 times. We see this all, like human beings do it. If the Big 12 does it, we're still going to call it the Big 12, and we're going to make a whole lot more money together. The future of the Big 12 starts with private equity and selling naming rights. From there, we need to sort out how every school can pay for this revenue sharing and revenue distribution with student athletes. Can Cincinnati afford to pay $22 million a year to its athletes? I don't think so right now. Can Iowa State? Jamie Pollard stopped 2 different stadium building projects because he was like, I don't know if we're going to have enough funds for this. Showing that even some of the established Big 12 programs are going to struggle to come up with that money when they need to pay the athletes. And if you don't pay the athletes $22 million, you put yourself behind every school that does, including other Big 12 programs. So we got to figure out who we selling the name to, which schools can pay $22 million. And then the third big thing is, and I give it, I think in the next couple of weeks, we're going to hear some news here, which ACC teams are coming into the conference. There was an argument that because of private equity and now this boost in billions of dollars from All-State or whoever, that Clemson and Florida State would look over and go, we could do that. We could help build back the Big 12. And I don't think so. Brett McMurphy even mentioned those two coming to the Big 12 in an emergency scenario. That sounds kind of crazy to me. However, Louisville, Pitt, even Miami at this point. I think Miami and Colorado are 2 fairly even college football programs. A lot of success in the 90s, minimal success in the last 2 decades. You forget about them. You're like, oh, wait a second. It's a power brand. I know Colorado. I know Miami. And what have you done for me lately? Not much. I don't think Miami's that big of a stretch. The SEC is not going to stick its neck out for that school. Neither is the Big 10, it seems like right now. So they are at acquire. They could be an acquisition for the Big 12. And then like a Virginia Tech or an NC State or one of those guys that's left over in there. But I think Louisville's a great place to start. Miami's a great place to start. And that's where the Big 12 goes expansion-wise.
Yeah, I think expansion is really interesting because it's like everyone hates it, but we also love it. And there's this
fun to
weird.
talk about.
It is fun to talk about because it's like, okay, give me your craziest idea. You want a school in LA to be a rival with a school in New Jersey? I'm in,
Could
like
happen, yes.
that's how expansion works. So I look at the Big 12 and I don't know what the magic number is. I think realistically, you either have to be even with or maybe a couple schools more than the SEC and the Big 10 just because just to sort of have that diversity. But at the same time, you don't want to dilute the product. You don't want to have because the more teams you have, we're talking about all these corporate sponsors. If Allstate's coming in to sponsor us, right, and we have 7 additional teams, it's like, okay, well now I'm only getting 5 million extra compared to say 12 million. So you don't want to dilute it. So I think the Big 12 is in a great position because they have a new TV deal.
Yeah.
They have some interesting brands already, and they kind of have the ability to be picky. So if the ACC schools are up for grabs, and let's just be real, I doubt Clemson and Florida State are both coming. It'd probably be a miracle to get one. It would be God gracing the earth to get 2 of them. But that doesn't mean you're not going to have your pick of the litter for the next biggest brands. Miami's there, like you said.
Right.
Maybe convince a Stanford to kind of overlook their whatever.
Don't stop.
Stanford's a big brand.
No, don't be the guy who just came in here and dropped a Stanford bomb on us.
I'm just
don't
saying.
Do that.
I'm just saying Stanford's probably Big 10 bound eventually, but I'm just saying there's big brands out there.
Guy. You're a Stanford guy.
North Carolina's out there in the open for up for grabs. So there's a lot of interesting schools. Duke as well, where you could just have all the power. Imagine a basketball conference, Drake.
Jeez.
Duke, North Carolina, Miami, Kansas, Houston. I'm probably forgetting other ones, but like that would be such a power. Like it would be insane. So the Big 12 has all of the opportunity in the world to sort of have their pick of the litter, which is a really interesting choice. And Stanford, I doubt coming to the Big 12, just going brand wise.
I do. Stanford's a big name. Stanford's a big Directors Cup school, and I just don't think the Big 12 loves that brand. And they don't. They Stanford waves like, oh well, we're smart, and the ACC values that. The Big 12 goes, we've got Iowa State, we have West Virginia, we have Houston. We don't really.
They're like,
care.
dude, our acceptance rate's 95%. Like, what do you mean?
It's like I hope that every Iowa State, West Virginia, and Houston fan, or anybody who holds degrees from there, is like, yeah, that's fine. I mean, they're like nobody's claiming that those are great academic institutions, and it's awesome. They aren't. Law of averages. Not everybody is. Those schools are really good at turning out good people who can also drink sometimes. And I have a lot of friends who went to all 3 of them that are still very smart people. But guess what? You're not Stanford. And the Big 12 goes, that's okay. We don't care that much. The Big 10, you'd have to have the AAU status. And Nebraska is like in limbo with that. And that's a big issue. It's like, dude, who gives a rip? Just make money and play good sports. That's all the Big 12 needs. That's all the SEC does, too. You go to education from Alabama, and it's like, yeah, everybody knows the school, but was it that prestigious? No, it wasn't that prestigious. That's fine. They've got their Vanderbilt, and there's some institutions in the Big 12 that are exceptions to that. But Stanford-wise, don't necessarily need those cats. And North Carolina.
Just example. Let's focus on the bigger brands.
Who would have thought that I would get so fired up about Stanford? I just haven't even thought about them in the Big 12. And
just throwing names out there, but I was like, let's focus about the big brands because it's like the Big 12. I feel like 2 or 3, 4 years ago, whenever Texas and Oklahoma were leaving, whenever that was, feels like a blur now.
Yeah.
They were in panic. They had schools trying to leave the conference to join the Pac-12, and now the Big 12 is in a position where they can look at a Stanford and be like, "No, we're good." Like, thanks.
When it was Stanford that looked at Baylor and TCU and said, religious affiliation is the education that good. I mean, there were reasons that the Conference of Champions didn't want certain Big 12 schools. And now, the Conference of Champions is dead, sorry. And the Big 12 is looking at poaching schools in the ACC and could likely tell Stanford no. But I do love North Carolina. I don't think they're a Big 12 school. I wish they were. I do think they end up going to the Big 10 because of their value. And Virginia is another one. You say like, oh, well, they're stupid smart and have a huge endowment. Could they be an asset? They will be to somebody. If the Big 12 would be grateful to have. And somebody out there is going, well, wait a second. Louisville's better at football than Virginia and North Carolina. Yeah, they are. But this is not about who's good and who's bad at football. This is about long-term staying power. And North Carolina has it. And honestly, Miami, to an extent, Miami has it in the way the Big 12 needs it, not the way the SEC or Big 10 need it. So I think that's hopefully what's next for the Big 12's future.
What an exciting future. So magic number before we go for the Big 12. I would say 20, 22.
Bill Connolly said 32. And I was like, Bill, what are we doing, man? Like how, why?
So many teams.
I don't think 32. I just, I was like, Bill, I don't want Syracuse and I don't want Wake Forest. Don't put that evil on me. Please stop.
Ricky Bobby,
I do.
That evil on me.
I do think the Big 12 ends up going to 20 teams. And that means that certain schools get left off the table. We recreate the AAC with a Boston College and a Syracuse and a Wake Forest and a Washington State and Oregon State. That's kind of where we're going. And they become that middle of the pack conference that you've always had. You have the Power Five, that one guy that was kind of close, but not that close. But you knew that its members were the next for poaching. We'll get that formed again when the Big 12 goes to 20. They'll take 4 of the ACC schools that do not opt to go to the Big 10 or get invites to the Big 10 of the SEC. And from there, you'll have a very solid third best conference in the country, and they're going to be valuable. They're going to make money. Your school's going to live. And if you're a Big 12 program right now, this is good for you. This is all very good news for you.
Big 12 football, it's going to be exciting. Big 12 basketball, it's going to be exciting. The Big 12 conference as a whole, it's going to be exciting. And I need you guys to go check out Drake Toll over on Locked on Big 12 because he's got you covered every single day. I got you covered on the Buffs every single day over here on Locked on Buffs. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, all that jazz. And we will see you guys on our next episode.